A faint tremble runs through his hands, like from the cold. But it isn't winter. It's fear. He's holding his newborn son, the child he waited for, longed for years. The moment he dreamed of is finally here. But instead of joy, there's a strange, sticky emptiness in his chest. Happiness should be within reach, but something feels off. The baby looks at him with eyes that don't reflect his own. Not a single trace of resemblance. Not a single feature in common. Around him, smiles, flowers, congratulations. But inside, a shadow is already forming. One that will soon grow into a storm. He doesn't yet know that his most sacred wish, to become a father, has been turned into a weapon of deception. That the woman he trusted above all else built their family happiness on a lie. Behind the lullabies, the photos, and the blankets hides a carefully buried truth, powerful enough to destroy everything. Today is his son's birthday, but what he's prepared isn't a gift, it's a revelation. One after which no one in the room will ever look at each other the same way again. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. I never thought everything in my life could pivot so suddenly. You can wish and wait for something for years, shaping it into a perfect picture in your mind, only to find that when it finally arrives, it feels completely foreign. That realization struck me with full force the moment I held my newborn son for the first time, the baby I had longed for, prayed for, dreamed of. He had just entered the world, and yet instead of the overwhelming happiness I expected, a strange tightness clamped down on my chest. This was supposed to be the best moment of my life. I should have been beaming with joy, kissing my wife's forehead, whispering thanks to whatever force had granted me fatherhood. But joy didn't come. Instead, a creeping discomfort took its place. His delicate features, the curve of his lips, the fuzz of his hair, the shape of his eyes, felt foreign. I tried to rationalize it. All babies look a little strange at first, right? Maybe the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital were distorting things. Still, the feeling stayed with me. Rebecca was lying beside me, drenched in sweat and completely drained from labor, her hair stuck to her forehead. I pushed my doubts down. With a practiced smile, I leaned in and whispered, "He's finally here, Rebecca. Our wish came true." She gave a soft nod. Her eyes shimmered with love, but beneath that, there was something else, a flicker of caution, like she was watching me for a reaction, waiting to see something specific in my face. That moment should have set off alarms. Rebecca and I had been together for almost 6 years, and for most of that time, having a child had been at the center of our world. We'd cycled through doctor after doctor, specialists, therapists, anyone who might have a solution. Every appointment came with promises that never materialized. We went through every test under the sun, her hormone panels, ovulation tracking, my fertility analysis. Time and again, the results gave us nothing, no diagnosis, no explanation, just more uncertainty. On paper, we were perfectly capable of becoming parents. But in practice, the months blurred into years filled with crushing disappointment. Each negative pregnancy test felt heavier than the last. Silence hung over us at night, thick with frustration and grief. It was during one of those quiet evenings, 3 years into our marriage, that Rebecca approached me with an idea. She looked uneasy, nervously twisting her fingers like she was bracing herself. "Derek," she said softly, "have you ever thought about using a donor?" Her voice was almost a whisper, but the words hit like a thunderclap. Sperm donor. That was what she meant. Even though every test had cleared me, just the fact that she had considered that route stirred something sharp and painful inside me. It wasn't just pride. It was the thought of raising a child who didn't share my blood, a child who wouldn't carry my family's features, who wouldn't be part of me in that fundamental way. I imagined our child without my father's square jaw or my grandmother's unmistakable green eyes, and it made me ache in a way I hadn't expected. My response came fast, too fast maybe. I tried to keep my tone steady, but I know it came out too harsh. "No," I said firmly, shaking my head. "I can't do that. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Let's keep trying. Just us." I added, "It'll happen. I know it. We just have to hold on a little longer." She held my gaze, eyes wide and searching. "But it's been so long," she murmured. "And the doctors keep saying we're fine. So why hasn't it worked?" "I don't know," I said, cutting her off before she could finish. I already felt the guilt creeping in. "I just can't," I repeated. She didn't argue. She let it go. Too easily, looking back. Her quiet agreement should have made me more suspicious. But I was too focused on feeling relieved that the conversation was over. So we kept going, month after month, heartbreak after heartbreak. Then, when we were running on fumes, when our hope was barely hanging on, she missed her period. The test came back positive. It felt like a gift from the heavens. I dropped to my knees in disbelief, tears pouring down my face. After 5 years, we were finally getting our chance. The pregnancy moved along without any major complications. Rebecca battled the usual fatigue and nausea, but there were no warning signs, except one. She began insisting on going to her checkups alone. "You're working so much," she'd tell me, smiling like it was no big deal. "It's just standard stuff." I didn't want to miss anything, but I didn't want to argue either. I never considered there might be a deeper reason for her wanting that space. Then the day came. After grueling hours in labor, our son, Julian, was born. His cries rang through the room. A nurse placed him gently in my arms, and all I felt was a strange, hollow distance. I told myself I was just overwhelmed or overtired, but somewhere deep inside, I knew it was more than that. Something was wrong. Once we brought him home, I tried to shake the feeling. I poured myself into fatherhood, changing diapers, preparing bottles, humming lullabies during sleepless nights. Rebecca seemed to be recovering well, her face glowing every time she looked at Julian. But whenever she caught me staring at him too long, a shadow crossed her face, as if she was worried about what I might see. I chalked it up to postpartum nerves. Still, that nagging doubt wouldn't fade. Julian's features, the thick curls, the unfamiliar slope of his nose, felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit. Babies change, I kept reminding myself. He'll grow into my features eventually. But he didn't. The longer I watched him grow, the more obvious it became. There wasn't a trace of me in him, not even a hint. Even strangers started picking up on it. Visitors would glance between the two of us and say things like, "Oh, he must favor your wife's side," or, "Does Rebecca have some heritage we don't know about?" I would fake a laugh, nod, make up something vague. But inside, I was coming undone. At the same time, Rebecca started behaving strangely protective, not in the usual new mom way, more like she was guarding something. She always seemed to find a reason to stand between me and Julian. Her posture changed whenever I looked at him for too long. Slowly, a question began to form in my mind. Had she gone through with it? Had she used donor sperm without telling me? I didn't want to believe it. The Rebecca I knew, the woman I loved, would never make that kind of decision behind my back. Or would she? Every passing day brought more evidence, more silence, more of Julian's face becoming a stranger's. And with that, the suspicion that had once seemed impossible grew louder, and impossible to ignore. If that really were the truth, why hadn't she just come out and told me? She must have known how deeply I longed to be a father. Maybe she was afraid I wouldn't be able to accept it. What once felt like nervous anticipation slowly dissolved beneath a tide of unease and quiet dread. Then came a night that still lingers in my memory. I was tidying up the living room when I noticed Rebecca transfixed by something on her phone. Her face had gone pale, her expression distant, haunted almost. I caught a fleeting glimpse of the screen, a photo of a man I didn't recognize. He had defined features, dark curls, and a self-assured look that was hard to forget. Before I could get a proper look, she locked the screen. I pretended not to see, but the image stuck with me. Was that the donor? Not long afterward, in the stillness of early morning, around 2 a.m., Julian began to cry. I lifted him from his crib, rocking him gently while humming under my breath. The soft glow from the nightlight cast shadows across his face, and something about him struck me differently that night. There was a faint, almost imperceptible resemblance that gave me pause. Something in his eyes, the angle of his brow, echoes of a man I thought belonged only to Rebecca's past. Elijah, her first husband, the one who died in a sudden accident just before fate brought us back together. Rebecca had only ever spoken of him in fragments, always with a sadness she didn't try to hide. I never pressed her for more. And yet, as I looked at Julian, I found myself thinking things I didn't want to think. That's absurd, Derek. He's been gone for years, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The resemblance was there, especially in the eyes. I remembered that same intense gaze from an old photo Rebecca kept tucked away, worn with time and care. The thought took root and wouldn't let go. After settling Julian back into his crib, I quietly left the room and collapsed onto the couch, needing space to breathe. My mind raced, chasing questions I was afraid to answer. That night marked the beginning of a silent obsession. Whenever Rebecca went out, I searched. Drawers, closets, storage boxes, anything that might explain the feeling gnawing at me. I kept trying to convince myself I was being irrational, that I'd find nothing and be relieved. But deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to be wrong. Eventually, in a neglected corner of the basement, hidden beneath years of dust and clutter, I discovered an old trunk with a cracked lid. Inside, buried under miscellaneous keepsakes, I found a bundle of papers that chilled me to my core. Medical records, labeled genome preservation. The documents were dated long before Rebecca and I were married. The clinic's name jumped out at me, Northwest Cryogenics and Fertility. And there it was, sperm storage authorization. The donor's name, Elijah Avery. The date was devastating, just months before his death. The files outlined storage conditions, consent forms for posthumous use, and a signed release form naming Rebecca as the authorized recipient. My hands were shaking as I read. This wasn't conjecture anymore. These were facts, documented and undeniable. There were multiple files, some signed shortly after Elijah passed, others more recent. Appointments, consultations, follow-ups. They spanned years, including the time Rebecca and I had been trying to conceive. I felt hollow. The truth was heavier than any suspicion I'd carried. Rebecca hadn't chosen an anonymous donor. She'd chosen Elijah, reached back into her past and brought him forward into our present. My dream of becoming a father had been built on a quiet betrayal. I felt physically ill, a wave of nausea crashing over me. She had used that dream as a mask for something she knew I wouldn't agree to. And that was the part that hurt the most. She knew. She had to know I wouldn't have been okay with it. So instead, she kept the truth from me, offering carefully worded reassurances. I could almost hear her voice in my head, soft and steady. "It's all taken care of, Derek. Don't worry." But by then, she had already made the decision. I was devastated. I gathered the documents like evidence, sealed them in a plastic folder, and locked them away in my desk drawer. My instinct was to confront her immediately, but something stopped me. I needed clarity. I needed a plan. Julian's first birthday was coming soon. I made a decision then. I'd wait. I'd collect every scrap of truth I could find, and when the time came, I'd present it all. No more pretending. From that moment on, things between us felt strained. I became distant, guarded. Rebecca noticed. Her eyes would linger on me with concern. "Is something wrong, Derek?" she'd ask gently. I'd fake a smile and say, "Just tired." But the truth gnawed at me. At night, while she slept, I pored over our financial records. Buried among everyday expenses were regular payments to Northwest Cryogenics, unassuming, but consistent. Each transaction coincided eerily with milestones in her pregnancy timeline. The final pieces clicked into place. Well over a year before Julian was conceived, she had paid for a procedure at a facility tied to that very clinic. Everything lined up, with a version of events that no longer held any truth. She had built this entire story, step by step, while I remained blissfully unaware. I had trusted her with everything, my future, my love, my desire to raise a child together. That trust had become the perfect cover for something I never could have imagined. I stopped sleeping. I revisited every moment, every conversation, wondering how I had missed it. I thought we were building a future together. But in that house, surrounded by laughter and photographs and dreams we were supposed to share, I felt like a stranger wandering through the ruins of someone else's life. Part of me still carried a lingering affection for Rebecca. She had been the woman I'd imagined growing old with, the one I spent half a decade building dreams and a life beside. But those feelings had curdled. Now, every glance in her direction felt like a fresh wound. I couldn't see her without being flooded by a sense of betrayal. My love for Julian had deepened into something primal, unwavering, but learning that he wasn't my biological son, that his real father was a man buried in the past, made every joyful memory from the last year feel like a cruel illusion. I was being consumed by a turbulent mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. The sky that morning was an unrelenting shade of gray, thick with the promise of rain. It was Julian's first birthday. Rebecca had put together a modest celebration, just immediate family and a few trusted friends, with cake, photos, and the kind of laughter that clings to special days. She imagined a simple afternoon of joy. I had something very different planned. That same morning, I had a meeting scheduled with my lawyer. Everything had been arranged. I held in my possession undeniable proof, DNA results showing I wasn't Julian's father, along with official documents from the fertility clinic that would form the foundation of a legal case for paternity fraud. I got up before anyone else, quietly retrieved the papers I had stashed away in a locked black briefcase, and took a long moment to steady myself. My stomach churned with dread, but also with a grim sense of clarity. Today, the truth would be revealed. By 2 o'clock, a gentle rain had started to fall, and guests began trickling in. Rebecca's parents, Graham and Lillian, entered first, smiling, cheerful, their arms filled with gifts wrapped in colorful paper. Lillian doted on Julian, her eyes shining as she cupped his face and told him what a big boy he was. I stood apart, distant, my emotions hidden beneath a mask of stillness. Around half an hour later, once everyone had settled in the living room, the birthday cake was brought out, a small white confection with a bright blue #1 candle placed in the center. Julian beamed, clapping his tiny hands in delight. Rebecca glanced at me with a careful expression, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Something wary flickered there, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Was this really the time? On our son's birthday? In front of everyone? But I shut that voice down. She had built this lie. Now she would have to live inside the fallout. We went through the motions, singing, taking pictures, laughing as Julian covered his cheeks in icing. And then Rebecca turned to me. "Derek," she said softly, "do you want to say a few words?" She probably expected something tender, maybe a tribute to fatherhood or a heartfelt thank you. Instead, my chest tightened. I swallowed hard, gathered myself, and addressed the room. "I need to talk about something important," I said. "It concerns Julian's parentage." Everything froze. Rebecca's smile vanished. Lillian raised an eyebrow, confused. One of my friends shifted uncomfortably, coughing into his fist. Rebecca gave a nervous chuckle, her eyes searching my face. "Derek, what are you talking about?" she asked cautiously. "I know, Rebecca," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I know about Elijah." Her name twitched. My tone was unrelenting. "I found the files, the clinic documentation, the transaction records, all of it. Julian isn't my biological child." A heavy silence dropped over the room. Graham and Lillian stared, dumbstruck. Rebecca looked as though all the blood had drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Then chaos hit. "This is ridiculous," Lillian snapped, her eyes blazing. "What do you mean, not yours?" Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes. "Derek," she whispered, "please, not here, not like this. Can we talk alone? It's his birthday." Graham stepped forward, his voice trembling with fury. "What the hell are you thinking? That child is your son. How dare you ruin this day?" I didn't budge. I unlatched the briefcase and drew out a folder. "I'm not making accusations without evidence," I said. "Here's the cryobank contract. Elijah Avery is listed. Here's the date, about a year before Julian's birth. And these," I said, holding up another paper, "are my DNA results. I'm not his biological father." All eyes locked on the documents I held. Rebecca looked ready to faint. Her complexion had turned ghostly, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Julian, oblivious to it all, giggled and wiped frosting across her arm. Graham's voice cracked. "Rebecca, tell me he's wrong. Please tell me this isn't true." She took a shaky breath, her tears falling freely now. Her voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. It's complicated," she stammered. "I used Elijah's sample. But Derek, we tried for so long. Every time I mentioned a donor, you shot it down. I didn't think you'd ever say yes. I just wanted us to have a baby." Lillian looked stunned, her expression contorting with horror. "You used his sperm? Elijah's? Your ex-husband's?" she gasped. "When were you going to tell any of us? Oh my God!" Her hand flew to her mouth, shaking in disbelief. Rebecca was sobbing uncontrollably now. "You have to understand," she begged. "I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it for us, for our family. Elijah's gone. It's not like I cheated while he was alive." I let out a bitter laugh. "You lied to me. You kept me in the dark through the entire pregnancy. You let me put my name on that birth certificate. You made me legally responsible for a child that isn't mine. You knew exactly what you were doing. That's paternity fraud, Rebecca. This is the end." Rebecca collapsed to her knees, clutching Julian to her chest, tears pouring down her face. "Derek, please," she cried. "Don't do this. We can fix it. I was going to tell you. I was so afraid you'd leave if you knew." But the damage was done. The truth was no longer a secret, and there was no way to put it back. I swear, I wanted us to have a child together. It was never just about me. Trembling with rage, I took a step back. "Say whatever you need to. It doesn't change a thing now. The divorce is already underway. As soon as the court schedules the hearing, I'm filing charges for paternity fraud. You tricked me into footing every bill, pretending I was the father. This is where it ends." I moved toward the exit, but Rebecca screamed behind me. Her mother darted in front of the door, eyes burning. "What kind of man walks away like this? Julian is still your son, whether or not you're the one who made him." "You've raised him for a year," her father added sharply, his tone biting. "You don't get to walk away just because your body didn't cooperate. For all you know, the test could be wrong. Maybe the issue was yours all along. My daughter did what was necessary. A real man wouldn't abandon his family," he spat. My fists curled tight as I tried to hold myself together. "Don't ever question what kind of man I am," I snarled. "Your daughter lied. She kept this entire thing from me. She used her dead ex's frozen sperm and spun a fantasy where I was the dad. She manipulated me. I'm done with all of you." Graham's jaw tightened, fury twisting his features. He looked ready to hit me. "You're throwing your life away," he growled. "You walk out now, and we'll drag you to court for child support. Whether you like it or not, that is your son." Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, fists clenched. "Is that what you want? Let's go. I've got every shred of proof I need. Your daughter lied, flat out committed fraud. You've got nothing to stand on. Now get out of my way." He stood his ground, so I shoved him aside. Lillian let out a horrified gasp, and a friend of ours rushed in to separate us before things escalated further. The room erupted into chaos, shouting, scrambling, people trying to restore order. I stormed toward the door and flung it open. Julian started wailing, startled by the shouting. Rebecca collapsed into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. "Derek, please, don't do this," she begged. But I couldn't feel anything anymore, just a numb, searing rage. I pushed the door open even wider. "This party's over. Everyone out." Her parents were still yelling, refusing to back down. "You're no husband. You don't get to walk away from your responsibilities. We'll ruin you if we have to." But eventually, all the shouting faded into bitter silence as the guests looked on in stunned disbelief. Her parents grabbed their coats, defeated. Lillian shot me a glare filled with pure venom. Graham muttered curses as he passed. Rebecca tried to follow me, still trembling, but I turned on her. "Don't. We're done." She collapsed onto the couch, holding Julian as he cried. My whole body was stiff with fury as I pointed toward the door. "Leave," I said, voice cracking under the strain. "You and him, now." Her mouth quivered. Tears poured down her cheeks, her eyes red and raw. "But Derek, this is our home. Where am I even supposed to—" "The moment you betrayed me, this stopped being your home." I cut her off coldly. "Don't make me call the cops. Just go." She let out a shattered sob, but gathered herself for Julian's sake. Clutching her purse and the diaper bag, she gave me one last heartbroken look and stepped into the rain, our son in her arms. What came next was a blur. I ended up on the living room floor, surrounded by the remains of Julian's birthday party. The cake was still half smeared on the table. A single unused candle lay near the edge, forgotten. I stared at it, hollow inside. I wanted to scream, break something, anything, but I just sat there, paralyzed. His first birthday, the day everything fell apart. Part of me believed I was justified. After all, she'd done this. But another part of me was broken, mourning the love that had turned to betrayal. I didn't move for hours. Sometime after 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a friend from the party. His voice was careful, tentative. "Derek, just so you know, Rebecca's in the hospital. Her parents said she collapsed. They think it's a mental breakdown." My jaw clenched. A storm of feelings swirled inside me, rage, guilt, disbelief. "Which hospital?" I asked, my voice low. He told me, then hesitated. "I get why you're mad, but maybe you should check on her. It sounds serious." I gritted my teeth. "I'll think about it," I muttered, and ended the call. But I didn't go. The betrayal was still too fresh. Earlier that night, my lawyer had reassured me. "You're in a good position legally," he'd said. "If you can prove deliberate deception, she can't claim child support. You kept records, right?" "I did," I confirmed. So I stayed where I was, letting the darkness consume the apartment. My phone buzzed again, then again. Probably her parents. I ignored every call. Each one felt like fuel on a fire I couldn't put out. Morning came with a crash, someone hammering on the door. I didn't even hesitate. I threw it open. Graham and Lillian stood there, both looking wrecked. Lillian had clearly been crying for hours. Graham's face was like stone. He jabbed his finger into my chest. "She's in the hospital because of you." She was already overwhelmed, trying to navigate motherhood alone without your support. And now you've turned your back on her entirely, child and all. I remained still. "She's in this mess because of her own lies," I said, my jaw tight. "She made her decisions. Don't lay this at my feet. Lillian stepped closer, her anger carved into every syllable. Derek, you've always acted like you're above everyone else, but this is your family. That baby might not share your DNA, but you're still married to our daughter. You have a responsibility. I gave a sharp, bitter laugh. That obligation ended the moment she violated our vows. You come in here preaching morality. What about Rebecca's betrayal? She did it for the both of you, Lillian shouted. She wanted a baby. You refused a donor. She took matters into her own hands. My temper snapped, and my face burned. There's nothing wrong with my fertility. We had it tested. The results were clear. She was impatient. She refused to trust that it might take time, I shot back. So she went behind my back, went to a clinic, and used sperm from a dead man. That's not just wrong. It's sick, and you know it. Graham lunged toward me, fists clenched like he was ready to strike. You'd better watch what you say, he growled. I didn't flinch, though my heart pounded. Get out. Both of you, I said, voice cold as ice. I'm not getting dragged into this circus. If you want a discussion, speak to my lawyer. Otherwise, stay out of my home. Lillian's voice trembled with rage. You're heartless. That's your wife in the hospital. He's not my son, I snapped. Stop saying that. I loved him. I really did. But now I know the truth. Graham raised his arm, fist ready to strike, but I grabbed his wrist before he could follow through. Don't, I said, low and serious. Don't make this worse than it already is. I shoved him backward. He stumbled into Lillian, nearly knocking her off balance. She began to cry. This is what we get after everything we've done for you? After bringing you into our family? You welcomed me, I hissed. As long as I signed the checks and pretended to be the father of a child who was never mine. Lillian's hands trembled as she raised her phone. We'll sue, for defamation, for emotional trauma, do whatever you want, I cut in. But get out. I slammed the door shut and locked it behind them. My ears rang with the thundering of my own pulse. For a moment, I half expected them to try and force their way back in. But after a few seconds of tense silence, I heard footsteps retreating. Then, nothing. 2 days later, I sat across from my lawyer, finalizing the divorce. Word had reached me that Rebecca had been discharged and was now staying with her parents, who were helping with the baby. Mr. Blake, a seasoned attorney with a calm, analytical demeanor, paged through the stack of documents, cryobank records, clinic invoices, and Julian's birth certificate. This is a straightforward case, he said. We'll proceed under grounds of infidelity or misrepresentation, essentially fraud. The cleanest strategy is a motion to disestablish paternity. He looked up. You can also request a court-ordered DNA test, though the existing documentation already builds a strong argument. And you mentioned you have supporting proof. Messages, appointments? I nodded. Yes, I have everything saved. If Rebecca disputes it, we'll subpoena the cryobank. They'll confirm she used Elijah Avery's semen. He paused, lips pressed together in quiet consideration. There's an ethical dimension too. Using a deceased donor's sperm usually requires written, explicit consent. In many places, it's illegal without that. He leaned back. It won't be entirely smooth, but you're in a strong legal position. She never told you. She let you think you were the father. That's textbook paternity fraud. He looked me in the eye. As for child support, you're not liable. No biological connection and deliberate deception. Once this is finalized, you won't be financially responsible. Even with those assurances, guilt clung to me like a weight. I hadn't wanted to hurt the child. I truly loved him. But that love had been built on dishonesty, and now it felt empty. The foundation had collapsed. We wrapped up our meeting. Mr. Blake said Rebecca would be served shortly after we filed. I left his office feeling drained, anger, sorrow, and a hollow ache for the family I thought I had, for a reality that had never been real. 3 days later, just as evening crept in, there was a knock at the door. Expecting more trouble from her parents, I flung it open, already bracing for confrontation. But it wasn't them. It was Rebecca. She looked exhausted, pale, with deep circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. Her sweater hung on her like a shield, oversized and worn. For a second, seeing her so broken pulled up memories of better times, but I forced myself to stay firm, rooted in the doorway. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "Derek," she said quietly. "Please, just 10 minutes. Can we talk?" I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to close the door again, but something, some distant echo of who I used to be, made me step aside. She entered slowly, like she feared the house itself might reject her. I led her to the living room. She sat carefully on the edge of the couch, her hands tangled together in her lap. "You filed," she murmured. "I got the papers." "Yes," I snapped, arms crossing defensively over my chest. She flinched, her eyes glossy with tears she refused to let fall. "Derek, you're completely justified in being upset," she murmured, voice trembling. "But please, just listen. You didn't want to consider a donor, and I was terrified. Terrified that I'd never become a mother. That dream was everything to me. You have no idea what it felt like to face disappointment month after month, negative tests, constant heartbreak. And then I remembered Elijah had his sperm frozen before the accident." Her voice wavered. "Back when we were together, we had talked about starting a family. It never happened. But I told myself, technically, it would still be his child. He wasn't some stranger off a donor list. I convinced myself it could be okay. That maybe, if it worked, it would finally bring everything I hoped for. We'd have a baby. You'd be his father. I truly believed you'd never have to find out, that you'd love him as your own without hesitation." My jaw clenched as I stared at her. "You stitched together your past with our present and left me in the wreckage. Did it ever occur to you to be honest with me? Or did lying just suit your plan better?" She brushed a tear away. "I was scared you'd walk away. I thought once the baby was here, your love for him would eclipse everything else. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I was being irrational. But I was desperate." "Desperate?" I echoed, venom in my tone. "That gives you the right to forge my signature on legal documents? To tie me, legally and emotionally, to a child who's not mine? That's not just wrong, Rebecca. That's betrayal in its rawest form." She pressed her hand against her chest. "I never stopped loving you, Derek. I swear I still do. Even if this marriage can't be saved, can we at least try therapy? I want to explain everything, to figure out how to co-parent. Julian needs a father figure." "You've already—" "Don't!" I cut in, voice sharp. I stepped backward, blinking rapidly as my own tears threatened to fall. The bond I thought I had with that child, it was built on a lie. Julian was never mine. Elijah's the biological father. Or more accurately, he's a child created by science and your deception." She stood, her face streaked with tears, and reached for me. "Please." I recoiled instinctively. "Don't touch me." A sob escaped her lips. "If you want a divorce, I won't contest it. Just, please don't drag me to court. I can't afford it, not with the medical bills and everything else. My parents are already drowning. If this goes to court, I'll lose everything." I stared at her, stunned by the plea. "You think you're the only one who's wrecked?" I scoffed. "My life just exploded. You lied to me for over a year. You let me believe I was a father. You let me imagine seeing myself in his smile. And then you dropped the truth like a bomb, vile and unforgivable. And now you can't deal with the aftermath?" She wept silently. "I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But what we had, it was real. I did it because—" "No," I said flatly, cutting her off. "You did it for you. You never gave me a choice. You robbed me of that." My voice broke as I continued. "Get out, Rebecca. I'm done, and you better get ready. For court." She froze, the pain hollowing her face, and then, without another word, she turned and walked to the door. Before leaving, she stopped and whispered, "I really did love you, Derek. I just wish you could still believe that." She closed the door behind her. Silence remained in her place. 3 weeks later, we were deep into the divorce process. Rebecca had been officially served. I had her name removed from the deed, permanently. The house had always been mine, purchased before our wedding, under my name, my mortgage. My lawyer also filed an eviction order, though she'd already moved out. The message was crystal clear: don't come back. And she didn't. Her parents tried one last time to reach me, demanding spousal support, threatening to ruin my reputation in the local papers. I recorded everything, blocked their numbers, and handed it all over to my attorney. They weren't my problem anymore. The house was quieter than ever, emptier too, but finally mine. No more lies, no more manipulations, only silence now. The once lively rooms, once filled with Julian's laughter and tiny cries, had gone still. This is the right thing, I kept telling myself. Living a lie would have been worse. At night, sleep came reluctantly. I'd lie in the dark, remembering how it felt to hold him, how I believed the universe had gifted me something extraordinary. That memory carved the deepest wounds. Anger and sorrow would churn in me until exhaustion eventually pulled me under. The court proceedings moved quickly. Between the cryobank records and Rebecca's forged paperwork, the evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled decisively in my favor. My name was officially removed from Julian's birth certificate. Legally, I was no longer responsible. Rebecca appeared at every hearing, fragile and worn, clinging to Julian like he was her last thread of hope. Now and then, I'd see the little boy's eyes flicker around the courtroom, wide and fascinated by the lights. He had no clue what any of it meant, and I had to keep reminding myself, he wasn't mine. The divorce was finalized on the grounds of fraud and irreparable damage. Rebecca cried softly as she left, Julian resting in her arms. Lillian shot daggers at me with her eyes. Graham didn't bother showing up at all. There was no relief, no satisfaction, just a heavy, final silence, a chapter closing. The gavel came down. Without a word, I turned and walked away. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.